Welcome to another episode of Reflections of a CEO, where I take you behind the scenes on what it's really like to run a business. So today, I want to talk to you about money, and specifically, how much should you pay yourself as a business owner? So the reason why I want to talk about this is because this question was asked to me in a community that I moderate, called Service-Based Businesses. If you go to servicebasedbusinesses.com, you'll see it. But it's a community of agency owners that are looking to grow their business, and basically when they're in there, they have free reign to ask me any question, about finance, sales, HR, operations, etc. And then I give answers based on my 7 years of experience. And then also in the group, I release a bunch of resources. Basically everything that we have built at Jakt, I'm slowly just releasing to the group if you're part of the community. So anyways, one of the questions that was asked, I thought it would be fitting to actually record an entire podcast on it. So if you're joining by video, hopefully we can put up the question so you can actually see it. But anyways, let me read the question for you, and then I'll give you my answer. So it says, "Hey Anthony, how do you generally think about paying yourself personally and the amounts? As you've touted before, there's big benefits to reinvesting in your business versus taking money out for personal things. In my situation, I just pay myself a founder's draw. My question is, what are your thoughts on paying yourself a set amount, bi-monthly, etc., versus B, simply paying yourself as little as possible a couple times a month, but not a default predetermined amount, just as little as you need, basically." So I believe owners should only take money out of the business if there's a profit. Like, that's just always made sense to me. If you're starting a business, right, and the business is not making money, why would you take money out of it? Of course, there's situations where if you're starting the business with someone and they need a stipend or living expense or whatever because there are real bills to pay, that's one thing. But let's just go to the question of, like, all right, say you have this business, how much should you take out? To me, it should be as little as possible, the absolute bare minimum. Why? I look at it from just a financial standpoint and a capital allocation standpoint, right? Like, if you take money out of the business, you're draining it of its resources, one, but two, I just believe that the greatest ROI is by leaving money in the business, at least when you're starting, right? And just from that, it's like, would I rather have $1 for me personally or $1 for the business? And I always believe that the greatest ROI I would have on my money was throwing it back into the business. And that's proved me right? So like, if you just look at it, I started the business with $500. Every time we made money, kept reinvesting, and now we have a 7-figure balance sheet. So my theory behind it, there's a lot you got to execute on, but it was right? Like, where else can you turn $500 into a million over a period of time, right? So you keep reinvesting in it. That's how I played it, right? So I believe that you should take a little as possible, because it just seems financially stupid and doesn't make sense to take out more. Like, why would you not want to compound that as much as possible, unless unless you want to, like, take out the money and you're putting it into something else. But really, when you're thinking about it, you say, when I think about it, where's the best use of my money? Is it leaving it in the business, or is it investing in something else? Right? And if it becomes, hey, I want to start diversifying, and now you fast forward, now I do take out some of the profits and I'm starting a Pulpo group, I'm putting it in real estate, I'm doing some other things. But for the first 5-6 years of the business, everything went back into the business, because I saw that as the greatest rate of return, right? Instead of me taking it out personally. Sure, my living expenses have gone up over time, but I've lived tremendously below my means, especially given how much profit the business was making. But to answer the question a little bit more directly, like, what are your thoughts on paying yourself a set amount bi-monthly versus simply as little as possible? I've never paid myself a set amount, right? Like I've tried it a couple times. I'm like, hey, let me like pay out this certain amount and this certain amount and like bi-weekly or whatever. The way I always viewed it was one, the most I should ever take out is on a monthly basis after all our expenses have paid and only if we made a profit, right? Like if the business didn't make a profit that month, and I'm talking on a cash basis, not accrual. There's a big difference here, and don't fool yourself, right? On an accrual basis, if you've billed someone $10,000, right, but you haven't collected it, you haven't actually received that money, right? So you could show on an accrual basis, oh look, I billed $10,000, we had $8,000 expenses, and so we had $2,000 left over, right? But if you haven't collected money that month, you've actually, say you billed $10,000, you only collected $5,000, and then you saw the expenses of $8,000, you've actually lost $3,000. So then what people do is then they take out money because they're like, oh look, we made money. No. Cash basis is how you do it because these businesses, at least the way I run mine, right? There's no investors, it's just based on cash. So this is like, primarily when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about self-funded businesses because that's what Jakt is. So anyways, take out money after you pay everyone. If there is a profit, right? Take out money, right? And here's a big mistake I see people making though. They're like, oh cool, the business made a profit, I'm gonna take out all that money, right? No, like, you need to leave money in the business in order for it to grow, right? You need cash reserves, right? We typically keep at least 1 month's of expenses in just cash, after tax profits, right? If something goes wrong or you need it or whatever, you need that cash on hand, right? If you drain the business of cash and there's nothing in there and something happens or you want to use it to fuel growth or whatever it is, you aren't going to have the money. So here's where it gets tricky, right? As you grow the business and your expenses go up each month, you need to have more cash in the bank, right? And this is where it gets tricky because, for example, right, let's say that you in January, let's say you build 10,000, right? And then you have 8,000 in expenses, right? And you're like, wow, I made $2,000 in profit. However, let's say you're starting to grow, right? And so that next month, your expenses actually jump up to 10,000 to service 12,000 in revenue, right? But that 12,000 in revenue, you're probably not going to collect for another 30 days. So what does that mean? It means that you have to pay people on your team, right? Because people don't wait, especially if they're W-2s. You have to pay them $10,000, right? So all that profit, that 10,000 that you made, you need to keep profit in the business to fund that extra difference, right? Because instead of just collecting 8,000, you have to collect 10. But you might not for a little bit, so you need cash reserves to fund that growth. So over time, right, like it's tempting to pull out cash, but that means that you can't fund the growth of the business, right? So you have a decision to make. Do you starve your company of resources to grow and just pull out the cash? And you could do that, right? If you just want to keep it stable and it's running really nice, then you can do that, right? But if you want to grow it, it's even harder to take out money. So yeah, I never took out a set amount. I always left as much in the business as possible. And then when I did decide to take out money, let's say at the end of the month, like, okay, cool, we've made a profit. Let me take the smallest amount possible for my living expenses, right? Like that's it. Living expenses, nothing more. For years, that's all I did, right? The bare minimum, kept my living expenses really low, right? And then spent money all in the business. So there have been times where I would go 3 months without taking money because I threw everything back in. It's not that the business wasn't making money, it's that I didn't want to take out money from the business, right? So that's the way I personally look at it. You should take as little as possible because it just financially, like the best ROI on your capital would be to throw it back into the business. But that's how I personally look at it, right? Not everyone may look at it like that, or if you want to just take out the money and spend it on something, fine. Just realize like you're gonna have less money to fuel your growth and the ROI on that dollar, right? Think about how you're gonna spend it. So yeah, that's the way I think about it. Today, much different position. I don't take out monthly draws. I take out quarterly distributions from the company, although we're in a much different place, right? But that's the way I look at it, right? Is like you should only get paid if the business is making money, and you should only get paid if the business is making money, and after the money you decide to put into, leave in the business, right? And that's something that in year one, I didn't really understand because we made money and then I took it all out and I was like, wait a second, I have no money to, we wanted to hire our first person and I had to pay their salary while we were waiting to collect money. And I was like, oh, wow, I need money on hand, right? So I can't take out all the profit. And then it just compounds over time, right? So that's what I like to do. And then there was also one related question. And actually, before I do that, Sasha. So Sasha, my girlfriend, is standing next to me. She's out of the picture, holding our little dog who's sleeping in her arms. What other questions, or what should I also cover?
Yeah, I have a few questions. One, what's the longest you've gone without taking money?
What's the longest I've gone without taking money? Man, I don't know. It's been months. Definitely 3 months, maybe even 6 months.
I was going to say, I thought it was much longer.
Yeah, it was, I'm saying at least 3 months, 6 months, could be more. I will say that sometimes what I do, right, like, because by here's the cool part, when you keep reinvesting in the business, at the end of the year, it's like, wow, we ended up making a lot of profit because we grew. So then I'll look at it and be like, okay, let me take out 25K now, right? And then I'll use that and I'll be like, okay, this is what I have to live on for the next 3 to 6 months so that I don't have to take out any money from the business, right? And so then I'll just be able to be like, cool, I don't even need to think about taking any money out. I'll throw everything back in. So that's kind of how I handled it, was like, I'd wait for 6 months or 12 months to take out money, and then I'd take out a portion and say, cool, this is what I have to live on. And that's my constraint, right? And then everything else will go in the business. So then I got into the mode of I don't need to take out money for long periods of time.
I have a few more questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're not taking out money and you're waiting for the end of the year, how does that work with taxes? Because it's not technically a salary. So do you have any advice for people that are just taking out money, withdrawals and things?
Yeah, so here's a key point, right? And this is the way we set it up. And this is also, shameless plug, how we help you set it up through Popol Finance, which is our finance firm for agencies only. But so you have to pay taxes. So when you take out money of the business, right, because you're not receiving a W-2, and let me also be clear, this is really for LLC structures, right? If you have an LLC and you are an owner, everything is pass-through income. What that means is that everything actually flows through to your personal tax return. So any money that the business makes is actually goes to your tax return, and you have to pay taxes on that. And if you're used to a W-2 salary, taxes are taken out for you. With an LLC, they are not. You have to pay taxes, right? And so the way we set it up, the way I've always done it, is I set up a separate checking account, or we actually do a savings account, get small interest rate on that. But anyway, savings account that we don't touch, and at the end of every month, right, after we paid our expenses, whatever's left over, we take 40% of that and put it into the tax account, right? So for example, let's say we had 10,000 in revenue, we collected 10,000 in cash, we paid 8,000, and we have 2,000 left over. Before I take out any money, I pay 40% of that to the tax account, right? So that 2,000, right? You take 40% of that and you put it over, and then you have what's left over. And what's left over, then you make a decision. You can take that all out, or you leave it in the business, right? So then I take out money based on that, and when I take out money, I know, cool, this is tax-free, free and clear, because the business has money to pay taxes.
I think that's a really good point, that the expenses and little things like that, putting away money, that people don't think of. And I think, especially when you're the owner of a sole proprietorship or an LLC, people think that you make all the money that the business makes. So can you talk a little bit about how your money compares to the business money and how there's such a big difference? Like, you have no money, basically.
Yeah. Here's like, I mean, there's a good point here. Is like, yes, sure, the business makes. So like, if you look at our last year's tax return, right, it'll show that I made hundreds and hundreds of thousands because everything's passed through, right? Like something like 700,000 or 800,000 or whatever it is, right? But here's the way it works. One, you have to pay taxes on all that. And then two, you need to, like I said, right? You leave money in the business. So it's not like I'm taking all that out. So like, just to do some like simple math, right? Let's say you make 500,000, right? The business makes 500,000 and you pay 40% of that, right? To the government. That's 200,000, right? Then you're left with 300,000, right? Of that 300,000, then you have to leave some in the bit. If you just took that all of the business, right, you'd have no money left in the business, and the business would essentially die, because then you need to pay people and you can't pay people, right? So you leave that in. So when people see this, right, like there's been years and years where, yes, on my tax return I have this, but I've decided to reinvest money, so I end up not actually taking very much at all, right? And that's something that's important to notice. You could say, wow, look, I as a business owner made $500,000, and it's like, well, yes, you did, but it's not actually your money. You have to leave most of it in the business. So if you actually look at my personal accounts, there's like nothing in it, right? Like you would think I'm completely broke, and I've designed it that way, right? Because I throw it back in the business, because I think, right, if we made 500,000 hypothetically, we paid taxes, we're left with 300,000. I think by throwing that into the 300, throwing most of that back into the business, I can turn that into even more money, right? So yes, over time, and all the money in the business is technically mine. Like if we shut down the business, that's all my money, right? Because I own the whole thing and it's there. However, it's not very liquid in the sense of like, I can't just take it out right now. I'd have to close the business, or over time, I can take it out as we have more $500,000 years, and then we're putting money in, and if we don't want to fuel as much growth, I can start taking some money out. But really, like most of my net worth, right, is really all in the business. So all the cash to fund everything, right, is my money. So and it's also all my risk, right? Like if the business loses money, like no one else loses money, that money has to come from somewhere. That comes from me. So that's why, as a business owner, you get the upside, and you also get the downside.
And with that being said, with the risk, there's risk of bankruptcy. There's risk of all these things. At least when it's an LLC, because you said it's pass through, is that so? It's all on you, mm-hmm. right? Can you talk about that? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, an LLC is supposed to protect you, right? But like it's like pass-through income. So like, sure, you can shut it down and stuff. But I mean, and I've learned this, like you can have a lawsuit where they just name you too, right? So like, yes, the LLC is supposed to protect you, but then they also name you, and it's kind of crazy. But yeah, like the business, that's why it's like interesting. They're like, yeah, so like the business loses money. I'm like, yeah, the business loses money. No, I lost money, right? Because if you own the business, you also lose the money. It's your money in there, right? So you lose it. And that's where people sometimes, especially, and look, if you're running a business, employees, it's very hard for them to understand this, but the money in the business is not the business's, right? It is the business's, but it's your money, right? And so I try and act like it is not my money, right? I act like it's my business's money, but at the end of the day, it's hard when it's like that's your money. So yeah, it's like, sure, you have it set up like that, but it's all your money too.
2 more questions.
Yeah.
Is there any advice that you could give to someone who is starting out, the way that they could set up their company and kind of explain this to their employees so they understand more? Is there anything you've learned around that?
That's a difficult one. How to explain it to employees? Yes and no, because like, it's like you want them to understand, but like they're just not at some extent. So all they can do is like listen to something like this, right? And like understand how the business actually works, but trying to like show them, these kind of things or whatever. I've kind of like said, hey, look, like there's a difference, right? You're not going to get paid as much as the owner. Hell, there's been many years where if you just look at how much I took from the business, right? It's less than every employee that we have, right?
Not combined. Like less than 1.
Yeah, I'm talking less than 1, right? Like I was the lowest paid person for years, pretty much every year, until like some years I would take out a little bit more, but I was never ever by the way, the most paid person at the company. I've never told people this, right? But I was never. Sure, I made money on my tax return, and then like if you look at it on paper, I made a lot, and the business, all the money in the business is mine, but I leave it there, right? So everyone else actually like personally makes more money than I do, right? As a business owner, right? And that's something you just have to get comfortable with, because I believe long term it works out nicely for me. I'm willing to take on the risk, right? That's also not a guarantee. Like if the business actually doesn't make money and you can't leave more money in the business, like you actually just make less than everyone, right? Like, and that's what, to talk about employees, people don't really understand all the time is like, you're taking all the risks. So everyone else gets a salary, right? You could get zero money, right? Or there's been a year where like, we didn't make enough money, or we were growing, and so I had to throw in everything. So I actually took zero salary, right? Like that's actually the case. I don't share that with employees, but like the truth is I've taken zero money out of the business before because I needed to throw it back in because I wanted to. It was my choice, right? But then you get outsized returns later. In theory, you should. Higher risk, higher reward. So it's not something I look to explain or justify. It's kind of just like, hey, this is what it is. I've never been like, look at me like taking less, but like that's the actual truth, right? So if you're a business owner, just do your thing, right? Like you're taking on more risk, and you should, in theory, get more reward. Or I mean, you could also make just less than everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Any more questions?
I have one more, but I think it's a tad bit off topic, so we can save it for another time.
Right. So in the group, there was a second part of the question that they asked, which was a related question I'd love your feedback on as well, would be getting as many things as possible as business expenses that the business paid for. Yeah, so the whole question is just around expenses. Yeah, so here's a benefit to being a business owner. You can expense a lot of things, especially as an LLC, right? Especially if you're working all the time. Everything is a business expense. So if you're joining me by video, this is my home office, right? This is an expense, right? And when you can expense something, here's a cool part about expensing. You're using pre-tax dollars, right? So like it's like the government is incentivizing you to reinvest in your business. It's freaking great. Right, so like everything from this computer I'm talking on, here, the camera, the microphone, everything, right? That I have, right? All the books here, this laptop that I'm, holding, all of it, this phone, right? Like everything is pre-tax dollars. So essentially, like your money goes a lot further, right? So for example, instead of someone, if you make $100 as an employee, you have to pay taxes on that, and say you're left with $70, right? So then you have to use $70 to try and buy a phone. Well, if the phone's $100, well, you're kind of shit out of luck. However, if you're in business, you can just take that 100, pay for the phone directly, boom, tax-free, baby, right? Because it's a business expense. So there's a lot of benefits too. So while, yes, I don't take a lot of money personally, I get to expense a lot of these things, and it's completely legal to expense things. And the government even wants you to. I mean, they've literally designed the tax system so that you can expense things through your business tax-free, right? So also, that's why it makes so much sense to reinvest for me. It's reinvesting than spending money on people or whatever it is, because you get an automatic return on your money, right? Literally, you get a return on your money because you're not paying taxes. So that's why it's like, wow, why would I not reinvest, use pre-tax dollars, and just compound that? And then eventually, when I take out the money in profit, yeah, I pay taxes on it, right? But like, you get such a massive benefit by expensing things. So that's my view on expensing things. So, anyways, I have a call to jump on. Maybe those of you joining would appreciate this. Back to backs today. So, anyways, that's it for this episode of Reflections of a CEO. I hope it was helpful. If there's any questions that I didn't answer or that you would like to ask me, please find me on one of the social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter. Just type in my name, Anthony Tumbiolo, you'll see me. I would love to know and answer them. Also, if you liked this type of question and answer, we do more of this in our online community, servicebasedbusinesses.com. We'll put the link in the description here. Being transparent, it does cost $100 a month to join. That way you're actually committed to it. I tried doing it free. People never used it. Charge $100 a month, which I think, by the way, is super, super low. But a good way to get people to commit. We have a nice little community there. And I'm answering questions like this every single day in there. So anyways, Thank you again for joining me for another episode of Reflections of a CEO. Please subscribe, share this with someone that you think would like this and it would be helpful to them. And I will see you all next time.